Welcome back, everybody. This is the second week in a row we're doing a COVID-19 podcast. We're into May now, May 6th. And
May 6th. Cinco de Mayo was yesterday. Did anything good?
Cinco de Mayo. Yes, we actually had my son, Bo, his third birthday was May 3rd. So we did the drive-by parade, which is what everyone's doing now.
Isn't that weird that as a kid now, like they may remember, and who knows how long this goes on, drive-by birthday parades. That's like a thing. You see it all over social media. Like there was a time when a birthday party was a birthday party. Now they're drive-by birthday parades.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it doesn't last long. I mean, I will I will move if it continues. I mean, I am not one. You're
losing it, man.
Yeah,
you're losing it.
I don't like how we're just like totally losing our freedom.
You're completely breaking down.
Things are totally changing. Yeah, I don't like it at all.
We'll get to that. So between last week and this week, outside of your son's birthday, anything, you went upstate?
Yes.
Get anything done up there or what?
No, it was fun. Went turkey hunting one day. Didn't see a turkey. But
you seem to go hunting a lot and never come across what you're looking
hunting,
for.
Listen, I've only been hunting probably hunted for 3 years now. And it's not like I go each year. I'll go like once for a few days. And even the days I go, I'm not sitting in the woods for 8 hours. I go for a couple hours.
And that's that.
And then I get hungry or I got to pee and I go home.
I have a buddy who lives upstate New York, and I think he just went turkey hunting actually, and he showed me the arrow that he uses to shoot these turkeys, and it looks like vicious. This thing, it's an arrow that has like these three like wavy things sticking out around it, and I guess it rotates when it shoots, and it literally like a fan flies through the air and just takes the entire neck of a turkey off in one shot. They say it's more humane than shooting something and it flying away and still being alive.
Well, yeah, as long as it's a kill shot, that's humane.
I don't know anything about it.
If it's an instant kill, that's humane. But I don't know anything about that specifically.
But I think it is an instant kill.
So then that's humane. I would say that.
What were you hunting with?
Shotgun. I'm not like a bow hunter. I hunt with a shotgun.
Do you hunt with slugs to
No.
kill a turkey, or do you hunt with the bird shot?
Yeah, the bird shot. The full choke. You put a full choke on the shotgun, and you hunt with a shotgun.
So it's a tighter pattern.
Yeah, it keeps the pattern tight. But hunting's tough because the animals are elusive. So all the hunting I've done is basically you sit like in a tree stand or a blind, and in the case of the turkey, we made turkey calls.
Right.
But we didn't even hear any. They just weren't in the vicinity, and we changed spots. We still didn't hear any. They need to be in the vicinity. In the case of deer hunting, which I've also done, I sit in a tree stand or a blind, and you sit and you wait for a deer to pass. But to really do it, you need to probably sit for 8 hours, like a full day. And if you're not doing that, I guess the other type of hunting is like tracking, but that's extremely hard. You have to know what you're doing. Like you watch these shows of people hunting and they're out in the middle of nowhere and they're trying to find the animal and then they track it. I don't know how realistic that is. I don't know if at some point they're waiting, but it's extremely hard to hunt unless you're luring the animals in with bait, which is illegal.
Oh, that is illegal?
Yeah, you can't do that. Unless you're doing that, you're going to have a lot of unsuccessful hunts.
See, I don't think I could shoot an animal.
I could. I never have, but I'll tell you how I know I could. I saw a deer. I was in the blind. I saw a deer in shooting range. Yeah. Came out, a nice buck. Came out. It was perfectly positioned sideways towards me.
So you could have
close. I pulled up and this is the first time I saw something that I could actually shoot. I pulled up my rifle and I didn't even think. I fired off 2 shots in probably a matter of 3 seconds. I missed it. I didn't kill it. Now looking back, I realized my mistake was that I next time I need to take a breath, take my time.
Sure, it wasn't a Freudian miss.
So I never knew if I could. But after that, I was like, all right, well, I can. I mean, I didn't even think. I was like, I'm trying to kill this thing. So.
Yeah, my thing is I just don't know that I could do it. I don't know. I have I have a friend who shot a deer dead,
Mm-hmm.
and he was it was a situation where he literally like just met his girlfriend at the time's father. And like one of the first male bonding things they did was to go out in the woods and hunt. And he's a city boy, so it was probably like a bit of like a test there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let me take this city boy out and show
Yeah.
him, what it's all about. So apparently he's in the tree stand, whatever the case may be, shoots the deer dead. And he said after he kills the deer, a baby deer comes out.
No way.
And the baby deer was staring at what was probably its mother or father, dead on the floor. And since then, he's never gone hunting again.
Well, that's Well, it was probably a doe.
I mean, I don't know shit
Female
about
deer.
it. All I know is that's a terrible story, and I don't think I could do it.
Well, if you needed to, you would. But if there's a meat shortage, and you
Well,
go to the
there
store,
is a
there's
meat shortage.
Well, you
That's
go-
another thing.
But you haven't ran out of meat yet.
Well,
If you go to the store and there's no meat, your family can't.
I
eat
could live
meat,
on macaroni for a long time.
You wouldn't hunt.
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. But hunting doesn't seem like, for me, something that I could do. But then you hear things like from Joe Rogan and everything that he talks about on his podcast, where he's like, if you don't kill that deer quickly and efficiently,
Mm-hmm.
the alternative to that deer and how it's actually going to die is so much better. I mean, freezing to death in the middle of a winter where they get stuck in a tree or a hole or something like that, they can't get out, and then another animal eats it alive. Like they talk about all these things on Rogan's podcast, and I never thought of that angle, but it is a legitimate angle.
Yeah, hunting is a way to keep just populations in check. They obviously, you need a hunting license to hunt, and then even once you have a license, you have to get a tag, and they don't give out unlimited tags. They give out a certain number, because if they don't, there's just not enough resources in the winter to keep all the deer alive. There's not a lot of
There's a deer problem for sure.
Exactly. We've killed off most of the natural predators, right? So it's not like a huge number of bears or whatever else, wolves that hunt the deer here in like upstate New York where I go. So to help keep the population in check, because there's not enough resources, you can hunt. And yes, if there was no hunting, the resources that are available in the winter to keep the deer alive, there's not enough. So they would freeze to death or suffer, for sure. But I mean, that's also.
You ever see how big a wolf gets?
Yeah, they're huge.
I had no idea a wolf. I thought a wolf was like the size of like a German Shepherd, or like
No, wolves are big.
one of those wolves that you see, those Alaskan, whatever you call them, with the blue eyes that people have as domestic pets. No, a wolf is like not much smaller than a baby horse. And imagine getting hunted by a pack of those things. No is right.
No.
They didn't have them here, though. They weren't in New York like before.
I don't know.
Man, are they upstate New York? I don't think so.
Not that I know of. I mean, there's coyotes. I know there's coyotes. I don't think there's wolves. I'm not an expert in this area. I've gone hunting a few times. I like spending time upstate and like just walking through the woods, riding quads, that type of thing. But I'm by no means an expert, so I don't know.
So what's it like upstate? Being that downstate is completely shut down and everything. I'm being told, because we actually have a client who goes back and forth from Long Beach to upstate New York, and he said that you wouldn't even know anything's going on up there.
Well, I was like 30 minutes outside of Binghamton. It's definitely a rural area. You have to drive a half hour just to get to the nearest supermarket.
Oh, Jesus.
So when I'm there, I drive 10, 15 minutes just to like a local gas station, and there's the Family Dollar across the street, which is where like we'll get most of our supplies. We were just there for 2 days. If we're going for a long stay, we'll bring up stuff, or we'll drive all the way to the supermarket. But so in the local gas station and the dollar store, people are wearing face masks.
Oh, they are up there.
Yeah, I was curious they would be, but they are. There's signs on the gas pumps, please wear gloves, wear your mask.
Interesting.
So that's New York. It's an executive order to wear that stuff, and it seems that people are abiding by it, taking it seriously.
That's interesting. I didn't think it would be like that up there, but apparently it is.
I thought I might walk into the store and be like an outcast. Everyone look at me like, what's this guy with the mask doing? But as I was in my car, I saw people walking in and out with the masks. Everyone knows. Everyone does it.
That's pretty wild. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. Yeah, I mean, since last week, I've been home on Long Island. I got to tell you, people are getting restless, man. They're not abiding by this whole stay-at-home order nonsense. I think they're out and about. I mean, you go out on the roads are packed.
Mm-hmm.
You go to a local park, there's tons of people there. You go to Costco, there's a line around the store to get in. You go in and the place is packed. I mean, I guess a great question really is how long can you keep people in their homes? You know, forget about like the whole getting back to life kind of thing, but how long can you keep people, how long will people listen to a stay-at-home order to stay in? Because I can tell you right now, I don't feel like they are.
Well, I think not much longer. See, in his press conference, it was either yesterday or the day before, Governor Cuomo said this situation is not sustainable. And I think he was referring to it not being sustainable from an economic standpoint, which it's certainly not.
Right.
But if you put that to the side, and like you're talking about, just is it sustainable from just a people standpoint, a practicality standpoint? The answer is also no. People aren't just going to stay in their houses and do nothing with themselves and their lives and their families.
No.
They're gonna go out. They're gonna live. It's just not gonna. You know, people. You say 30 days to slow the spread, or initially it was 15 days to slow the spread. People are like, okay, that makes sense. Listen, we're gonna extend it to 30 days. This is working. We want to make sure. Okay, fine. But after that, it's like we've slowed the spread. We've achieved the goal, and at a certain point, I mean, we got to live. You're going to throw away a year of your life locked up in your house doing nothing.
Yeah.
Life's not safe. You know what'll happen? They'll lift this order a year from now, and a hurricane hits and wipes it. You know, it's
right.
So what are we supposed to do?
I mean, like even yesterday, we ordered for Cinco de Mayo. We ordered some from this place near us. It's called Pico something, and we tried calling them. Their phone was off the hook. We're like, what's going on? So my wife actually took a ride up there while I stayed home and watched the kids, and they said that they disconnected their phone. They can't keep up with orders, and people are going crazy for tacos. Like I think there is this legitimate itch to get back to it, which kind of makes me question, you know. Will people go to restaurants? I think the answer might be yes. Will people be out and about doing their thing to get back to some sense of normalcy after this? Yeah, because I mean, that's the whole discussion now, right? Is as they start opening states, will people get back to life as usual? And I think, I could be wrong, that we may be overestimating the idea that people are going to be afraid to go do things, because I think people really want to go do things. I think people want to get out. I think they want to have a different meal. I think they want to go out to eat. They want to return to life as usual. They want to go to the gym. They want to do these things, right? So the question is does it all take the same form as it once has, right? Are people going to be going to restaurants at the same rate that they were? Is the restaurant experience going to be the same? Are you going to have to wear a mask in a restaurant?
Well, how do you eat and wear a mask?
Well, that's a good question, right?
You can't,
because masks.
And what's the point if you're allowed to pull down the mask to eat or take a drink of food? Well, then your mask is off. But 25% of the time anyway, so what's the point of even having the mask in the first place?
I agree with you, but you know that's going to be a mandate. It is right now, right? Right now you have to wear a mask.
Yes, if you can't social distance. At first, I thought a lot of people weren't going to go back to normal. But yes, I think at a certain point, people just want to live their lives. You know, if I asked you, and I think most people would answer how I think you're going to answer, listen, I can make it so that there's a 99% chance you're safe. Nothing bad will happen to you and your family, but you have to stay in your house and you can't really go near other people. Or you can live life as normal, but hey, there's risk with that. You might get sick. You might get into a car accident. Something bad might happen. Which would you choose?
To live my life.
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. For a 15, 30-day period, people said okay. But at a certain point, people... it's not, one is you're never safe. You can't be safe. You could be in your house, the house could go on fire. You know, like I said, a hurricane could hit something.
True. That's true.
So I used to think.
Listen, I go back and forth on this. One minute I'm sitting here saying that I think we're going to get back to normal. Everything's going to be fine and dandy. There's that demand for things that people want. And then on the other hand, when I start thinking about, the opposite side of the coin, it makes a whole lot of sense too. I mean, look, you hear all these things, right? Yesterday, articles started to come out, and I know doctors that are in hospitals who I've had discussions with that now kids are getting Kawasaki virus, which is supposedly a very rare virus that they don't see many cases of, and all of a sudden they're seeing like a little spike of these cases, and kids are presenting different symptoms. It's like Kawasaki-like, but it's not exactly Kawasaki specifically. If there's a residual effect of children getting sick, then we've got a real problem. And I think what this really all comes down to is we just don't know what we're dealing with still to a very high degree. I mean, one of our friends is an ER doc, an urgent care doctor. And he was saying that the symptoms for this virus keep changing as time goes on. So in other words, like if any other virus out there or any other ailment has like 1 to 2 very distinct symptoms that a patient will present with and describe, and you kind of know where you're at with it. With this, it keeps changing. He actually said that there's something to do with people's feet now with this virus. And I actually mentioned it to a group of friends of mine in another group chat that I'm in, and they threw an article back at me and said, yeah, the articles have been presenting themselves that people's feet are turning like bloodshot red. It looks like they're bruised, and it's from the coronavirus. But
well, is it changing, or do we just have no idea what we're dealing with? I mean, it's a brand new disease. So one is it seems to affect everyone differently, that's for sure. But we haven't had enough time to study it and learn about it. When the first time the flu was ever introduced to humanity, maybe it was the same thing. Maybe it was, listen, we see some people, this is happening to, other people, this is happening to. We don't really know what we're dealing with. Symptoms seem to be different, but now we've got to figure it out. We know it could be the same thing. The other thing that I hate with all these articles is someone publishes an article, and the article says kids are starting to present with Kawasaki, or now symptoms are starting to show there's weird effects with the feet. An article's published like that, and it might have happened to a group of 10 people, right? Which is terrible for those 10 people. But all of a sudden, that now becomes everyone's assumption and mindset is, well, this is now going to be the reality for everyone who gets it, and everyone's going to get it. And when you still think about it, like on Long Island, I forget the numbers, but I think it's something really low. Like 1% of the population has it, or maybe even less than that.
I think Cuomo did some kind of.
How many people on Long Island
I think he said like
30,000.
16% of the population
will have the antibodies, but have been tested positive. So like 14% of the population have the antibodies based on preliminary data.
Well, then that would mean 14% of the population had it.
Correct, but from actual positive testing, I think on Long Island it's only like 50 or 60,000 people have tested positive. And there's something like 7 million people on Long Island. So do that math. The percentage of people that has is very low. And now the percentage of people that are going to develop, or children develop Kawasaki disease or this foot issue, is even a smaller percentage of that. So it's all.
The foot issue is a symptom now of corona.
Yes, but my point is for how many people, for what percentage of the population that actually get it? It's so that I'm just getting back to are we going to worry about every little thing? If an article pops up.
No, but this is where we're at. So social media is a great thing for a lot of reasons because we're very informed, but
it's also too much. It's also always in your face.
The shit out of people.
It's always in your face. It makes you aware of every little detail. It's funny. Me and my wife joked about this during her pregnancy. Mm-hmm. Back in the day when our parents got pregnant, they went to the doctor like once, maybe twice. Yeah. And that was it. And people had babies and life was fine.
No problem.
Now you go to the doctor and she's high risk. She goes to the doctor throughout the pregnancy every other week. And so there's just, because you're going more, they find more things. They're aware of more things. I mean, they make you so crazy and you get so nervous. It's like, what are we doing here?
And
Humanity for all of time
yeah,
has been fine with no doctor or doctor once or twice a pregnancy.
yeah.
And now all of a sudden we're going 100 times and there's so many more problems.
Yeah, and now they're looking at the gamma cortex gene of the F2A2, RNA, DNA thing that it's like, wait a second. It's like, I don't need you to really, does the kid have 10 fingers, 10 toes, 2 eyes, a nose?
And we don't have control. They actually offered us testing for something. They said we can test you. They offer the test for the Down syndrome, all that. And they offer tests for some other crazy things. And Sam's like, do you want to do these tests? And I said to her, well, we're not going to abort the baby if it has one of these issues. It's not like a life-threatening issue, and it's not, we just wouldn't do that. So what's it matter? Why are we going to run that test? So we can just drive ourselves nuts? I mean, we're going to have the baby. So let's just live. And if something happens, we'll deal with it.
Let's yeah, I agree. You ever hear that I've heard on Stern, believe it or not, years ago, amniocentesis?
No.
That test. So that was a test apparently, I don't know if they still do it. They might, but they stick a needle through the woman's belly into the fetus, and they extract some blood or something like that, and it's a test to know whether or not I think the baby has Down syndrome. I think that's the way they did it, or the way they still do it, or whatever the case is. But the long and short of it is I could never sit there and watch that. It's just nuts.
No,
It's
I mean
nuts.
we would have something like that if the baby was going to have something where their whole life they would suffer. That would be tough. But Down syndrome, I mean, we'd have the baby anyway. So it's like, what am I? You see so many people with Down syndrome that have fulfilling lives and are happy and have such a positive impact on other people's lives.
There was actually.
So why are you going to test for it?
There was actually an actor that just did a movie with that
yeah,
guy.
I know what you're talking about.
Is it Peanut Butter or something like that?
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, and he's winning Academy Awards. So
if you want to test because you want to just prepare for what life's going to be with that I get, but also what things you have no control over. Why are you going to drive yourself nuts?
And tying it back to Corona, it's just out of control. I think it's become a big political game now too.
For sure.
So here we have Donald Trump, right, who is being very laissez-faire about the whole thing to the states. Like, look, I shut us down, and as far as reopening goes, different pockets of our country need different things now than others, right? So I'm going to leave that power to the governors and let them decide when these people open up. What he's really saying, and I'm not opposed to Trump. I actually voted for Trump. What he's really saying is, I'm going to give the power to the governors so that if there is a resurgence, it's not on me.
Well, the other side of that is, I think what he could be saying, and I don't know, and I agree with you, he probably doesn't want the responsibility, but the other side of that could be is that the governors are the ones who actually have the power per the Constitution, so don't put this on me.
Yeah.
That's somewhat responsible to give, because we shouldn't be giving the government all this power. I don't like that piece, that people have become political pawns, right? Blue states are shutting down, and we'll talk about it in a minute. Cuomo has this 4-phase reintroduction plan, all that. And then you have red states are opening up. People don't appreciate being political pawns.
Right.
They're not going to stand for that.
I agree. It's definitely interesting times for sure, man. I mean, on Long Island, according to what Cuomo's saying, he's saying that Long Island will likely be the last place to open up. We've checked the least amount of his boxes that he needs checked.
So let's talk about that. So Cuomo announced in the last 24 hours his plan to reopen the state. And so first is there are 7 criteria that he's going to look at. 1 is net hospitalizations for COVID-19 cases. 2 is a 14-day decline in virus-related hospital deaths. 3 is a 3-day rate of new hospitalizations below 2 per 100,000 residents a day. 4 is a hospital bed vacancy rate of at least 30%. 5 is an availability rate of at least 30% for intensive care unit beds. 6 is a weekly average of 30 virus tests per 1,000 residents a month. And 7 is the governor wants at least 30 working contact tracers per 100,000 residents. This one is kind of crazy. So now you a contact tracer. Is this people are going to be traced and followed? Are we now tracking people?
Yeah. Yes.
This is wild.
They have to, because they have to know.
When has the government ever made a law or put something like this in place and then taken it away? Once this goes away, they're not going to stop tracking. It's going to stay in place.
Yeah,
They'll find a reason.
well, that's why I think they're talking about doing it in cell phones. They have been for a little while now.
They're going to say, listen, this works so well with coronavirus. We're going to keep this in place to help with the seasonal flu, right? And now tracking has become a part of normal life. And again, it's how much do you want to trade freedom for safety? What's the line there? But this is if I had to guess, it's not going to go away. So now we're implementing tracing as part of his 7 criteria.
Mm-hmm. But they have to, because they have to know if you've been contaminated where you've been. Am I right or wrong?
Well, they want to know so they can contain it. Yes. So if you have it, they want to be able to see where you've been, so they can try and figure out who else you might have been coming to contact. So I get it. But again, how much do you want to give up your freedom?
When they start doing that
for safety?
On the cell, well, think about it like this. A lot of people bring up this point, right? 9/11, we lost a lot of freedoms after 9/11. Think about it. In New York City, to get into a building now, there's checkpoints and security, and you have to tell them where you're going, what floor you're going to. You can't just walk into a building, get in an elevator. And before 9/11, you were able to do that. When you get on a plane now, you have to go through checkpoints. You have to take your shoes off. You have to put all your stuff in those bins. You got to pass those bins through that machine. You got to stand in the thing that those are all lost freedoms. But in the end, do you feel better about getting on a plane? I know I do.
Yes. But
do you feel better about going into if you worked in a Manhattan building after 9/11, would you feel better about working in a Manhattan building with those security checkpoints?
Yes. So that there's a line, but this is the other thing.
Here's where it gets funny. If they start doing contact tracing with phones, right? And in 5 years from now, that turns into, we're going to use that technology to prosecute people in court for a crime. We're going to use that technology for things outside of
course,
contact tracing.
Well, the other thing is, again, we're never going to live in a 100% safe world. If every time there is a major disaster, we're going to give up a little freedom. 100 years from now, there'll have been 5, 10, 15 more major disasters every time we give up a little. And then next thing you know, you look back and the government, we all have to wear the same uniform. The government knows everywhere we go. You can't even curse in public without getting a citation.
It's North Korea.
It's so it's just you can't keep trading freedoms for safety. You can't keep building on it. Every time something terrible happens, you can't say we're going to put measures in place to prevent this from ever happening again. There has to be a line somewhere. When something like 9/11, yes, to prevent terrorists from killing Americans, okay, putting security in airplanes, security in buildings, that makes sense. It's just security. You're not really taking anything away from anyone. You're just kind of saying, to help you be safer, we're going to do security checks before, and that seems to be okay. But then when you talk about something like this, to prevent you from catching a disease, it might not be natural, it might be man-made, right? But from just protect you from Mother Nature, we're now going to trace you and make, we're only going to live virtually. Our kids are going to have to go do schooling virtually.
Well, let's before we get to that, let's finish this.
So that's the 7
So those
criteria.
are the 7 criteria that everybody needs to check. I think Long Island has only checked 2 of the 7 criteria, correct?
I'm not sure how many they've checked. I know as of like a week ago when I read it was 1. If it's 2 now, maybe. But after you check, I don't know if it's all 7 criteria or or at least the majority of those, then you can get into the 4-phase reopening approach.
And talk to me about the 4-phase reopening approach. What's number one?
So phase 1, after you've checked off either these 7 criteria, some of these 7 criteria, is phase 1 is construction, manufacturing, and some retail for curbside pickup.
So when you say construction, do you know if it's hundreds of people on a construction site, or is it limited construction?
So my understanding is there will still be, you're still going to have to wear a mask, you're still going to have to social distance, is these other measures will still be in place, which goes back to my point before of, once they implement things, it's tough to go away.
So how, like construction, can you really be productive as a construction company in phase 1? Or are you just kind of...
No, I think you can. I mean, you have certain scenarios where you might have to have guys working. Well, certain projects, it depends on the type of construction you're doing, but certain projects, maybe the timeline extends, because maybe as opposed to having 20 people on the job site and where you have an electrician, a plumber, other people all doing, multiple different tasks at once, working amongst each other, maybe you can't do that because you have social. So maybe the timeline gets extended. But then for the most part, most jobs you don't need, unless it's lifting something heavy or certain things, you don't need 10 people. You don't need 10 electricians. I mean, if you have a big building, but then you could have them on different floors, right? You're just doing, but in most cases, you don't need a large number of people in a confined space to get the job done.
See, I'm thinking like these major buildings, like these industrial corporate buildings, and even in the city, I don't think they're going to have, it's not going to be gangbusters, in that building to do. I think you're still limited to like 25 people or maybe 15 people, or whatever the situation is. If that's the case, then construction's not exactly open. It's still kind of functioning at 25% sort of thing. What is that? So it's construction, it's manufacturing.
Retail for curbside pickup. So retail stores.
So yeah, so if retail is curbside pickup, that means they're not staffing employees, right? They're maybe running at 10% capacity with a few people that are just setting up things to be picked up curbside. And there's no way construction's got 100 people on the job.
So let me tell you why this is so stupid.
Okay.
So retail for curbside pickup.
Okay. They're doing that now, by the way.
So am I going to order, okay, the retail store is open. Perfect. I can't go in. I still have to order it online and go pick it up curbside.
Why not just order Amazon?
Why would I not just order online for delivery?
Yeah.
What am I, okay, maybe there's some people who want to support their local businesses, but again, how long are they? So this is stupid. A retail store, it's like smoke and mirrors. You're just appeasing people, but you're not really helping them. You're still hurting them. Retail for curbside pickup, they can't operate.
So I'll tell you what retail for curbside pickup looks like, because I did that actually on Friday this past week, because I bought a pressure washer and I pressure washed my house, which is an awesome tool, by the way, and everyone should have one if you own a house. But the way it worked was, it was Home Depot, right? So I had to go online. I had to order my products for pickup online, okay, at a specific store. Then you drive to the store, and the way they had the parking lot set up was you pull in, you drive up to someone who's sitting there with a clipboard, you give them your name, okay, and then they tell you to go park in a specific parking spot. Every parking spot has its own letter and number. So there's A1, A2, A3, then the second row is B1, B2, B3, right? So you have to pull to your parking spot, and someone literally in a shopping cart wheeled out the pressure washer and all the other little utilities that I bought and just left it in the back of my car. I had to take everything, put it in my trunk, and I left. So in a place like Home Depot, I guess that makes sense, because you want what you want when you want it at that specific time. But most retail, if it can be done through an Amazon, they're going to do it through an Amazon. I mean, even toiletries right now, Listerine, toothpaste, shampoo, conditioner, I'm buying all that stuff through Amazon. I'm not going to my local CVS. Yeah. Because there's a pharmacy in my CVS, which means there's sick people in the CVS, which means I'm not going to the CVS, right? So I get it, but I think things like a Home Depot is okay with that.
But so my question is allowing businesses to open up under these new rules, is that actually a sustainable business model for those businesses?
No, not forever.
Let's use an example as a restaurant. If you let a restaurant open, but there has to be social distancing, et cetera, you're going to have less. So the restaurants maybe at 25% of capacity used to be at 50% of capacity.
Not even, maybe
They're
probably
not
15,
making,
20.
Restaurants don't make enough profit. So
No.
they're still out of business. So
Yeah.
it's the same thing with retail, same thing with construction. If you're going to limit all this stuff, is there enough? Do these companies make enough profit for them to actually still be profitable under these new limitations? If not, you're just appeasing people.
Well,
You're
so
treating them
what?
like
So what it
morons.
really comes down to is, can these restaurants pay their rent, and will their landlord allow them to not pay their rent?
And the answer
That's
is no.
really what it comes down to. Because if you're a restaurant owner, okay, your biggest expense outside of maybe your the salaries that you pay your employees is the rent, right? So, you've obviously laid off your employees, right?
Mhm.
Because you don't have any work for them. So you're doing this curbside pickup at, say, 15, 20% capacity.
Mhm.
Now, the question is, does your landlord make you pay them rent? If he does not make you pay them rent, you could stay in business. And they're
So
going to...
maybe the landlord wants to help people. Listen, I'm going to help you out for 3-6 months. Take it, but again, it's not sustainable.
But
At a
that
certain point, they have to
landlord,
collect rent.
that landlord also has a lot of expenses to own that building. That landlord's paying property taxes on that building. That landlord has to maintain the strip mall. They have to clean it.
Mhm.
They have to empty all the garbage cans in the strip. I mean, they have their own maintenance and management expenses, and then municipal taxes that need to be paid.
So this is. Well, finish the thought if you.
So the point is how does that work? And I know, and they have loans on those buildings that need to be serviced. And then to go even a step further up the chain, does the bank that they have the loan with allow them to not make the payment? Are they working with that landlord, or are they putting that loan in default and trying to repossess the property? What happens?
So this
And then the banks don't want assets on their books. We know that. They're in the business of lending money out, collecting interest, and that's their business. They do not want assets on their books.
So this is the problem with giving government the ability to keep us safe and make all these decisions. Is you have a few people making major decisions, and basically what the decision was in this case is we need to slow the spread to save the hospital system. It's going to overflow the hospital system, which I understand is a major concern because obviously if people are sick, if people get into an accident, if people need, whatever it is for their health, they need to be able to go to a hospital. So that was a major concern. But now you've saved the hospital industry, but the expense of that has been destroying the economy, destroying the restaurant industry, the bar industry, the hotel industry, the catering hall industry, the entertainment industry. You've destroyed the tourism industry. You've destroyed all these other industries, right? Yeah. So while the thought and the intentions were good, let's say we did the reverse. Let's say instead of the government having the ability to do this, it just happened. And then you kind of put, now instead of having a few people, meaning the government, make the decision, you now have the entire population, and you have all of this brain power coming up with a solution. So maybe instead of destroying those other industries and taking control, you don't do that. Everyone acknowledges there's an issue, and maybe what happens? Maybe doctor calls where doctors come to people's homes. Maybe that starts becoming a thing. There was already migration.
That happened in the past.
There was already migration of patients moving from hospitals to surgery centers and outpatient settings, right? Maybe that expedites that. Maybe little small emergent care places start popping up. Yeah. So you maybe have a little bit of initial problem, but guess what? People adapt. People are creative. People will find solutions if you give them the opportunity. So now you had a little bit of a problem, but the whole healthcare industry changed. You have home calls for doctors happening. You have outpatient centers opening. You have maybe specific outpatient centers where if you have a hernia, you go here. If you have COVID-19, you go here, right? So So the private sector, and we find solutions, and everything's fine, and we haven't sacrificed any industry. But now you've kind of saved what is probably the hospital system probably needed fixing. It was probably antiquated. There was a reason you were seeing migrations to outpatient centers. You were seeing all these emergent care places pop up.
Yeah.
Right. Healthcare is so expensive. It was probably a system that broken, and this could have been the catalyst to really change it and fix it for the better, more permanent. Like, how great would it be if at-home doctors became a thing again? If the doctor, you call, you say what's wrong with you or your children, a doctor comes, they wear their protective gear, and they come to your house and they take care of you. This probably would have been a very good thing. Now you've saved this very antiquated model, which is broken, and destroyed everything else at the expense. It just doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, I got a crazy little statistic for you that's going to make you insane because you're not happy with this whole thing anyway. So for and now the number may be a little off, but it's a little off. I'm really close to where it is because I remember hearing it and comparing it to the actual amount of deaths, and I was like, oh shit, it's not good. For every 1% of unemployment in this country, I believe there's another 37,000 deaths. I don't know if it's per month or per year.
Mm-hmm.
With every 1% of unemployment, because poverty results in death. It's ultimately. So it's like you're saying, they don't want this rush on the hospitals, but at the same and the amount of COVID patients that died in the state, I don't think it's at 40,000, is it?
No.
Right. So for every 1% of unemployment, you're getting another 37,000 people dead. And I don't know if that's a month or a year, but if it was a month, then it would be very concerning. I think it's a year.
When has the government ever come up with any type of innovation? Like it's the private sector that created the iPhone.
The government came up with the internet.
Okay. All right.
They came up with the internet, then they sold it to
it was still a private company, probably.
No, the government came up with the internet and then they sold it to a private company, which
so that's one good thing, but that's the problem with the government saying, "Hey, listen, everyone just sit tight. We're going to fix this problem." No, just let people live and people will find solutions.
Yeah.
They'll
so
fix and solve the problem.
What is phase 2?
Sorry. So phase 1 is that. Then what happens is after...
By the way, phase 1 for upstate New York, they're thinking is May 15th. Am I right?
Well, that's based on the 7 criteria. So if the 7 criteria we talked about, if you check off, I think it's most of those or a certain number of those, you can have phase 1. So it says they're going to start phase 1 after May 15th. And it's going to be for select areas. So that's phase 1.
But that's not happening here.
It's not happening on Long Island. No way. Once you start phase 1, it's 2 weeks, at least 2 weeks into phase 2. Because what happens is after phase 1, they wait 2 weeks, and then there's an evaluation period where they look at certain indicators. I'd imagine it's still some of those first 7. And then they go, okay, if those indicators are positive, they'll move to phase 2. So if you start upstate,
but if there's a resurgence of any kind,
they could go back all the way. They could say, we're shutting down phase 1 again. So in a best case scenario, you're at phase 2 on June 1st, and that's best case for rural areas like upstate New York, I'd imagine. So you have a place like Long Island. I mean, you're lucky if you're at phase 2 by June 15th.
Lucky,
I would think, the way this is going.
And, what will be very interesting is to see what happens in the other states that are very willy-nilly right now, that are opening up before us. There's a reason we're lagging behind them, and it's because we want to see what happens there.
But let's look at, so what I'm just talking about, so if the other states, if the governors stay out of it, let them open up and just stay open, maybe you do see a little uptick in...
By the way, we haven't flattened the curve nationally.
No.
Nationally, the curve is actually still going up.
But let it play out. So maybe
in New York, the curve is flattened.
So maybe you see an uptick in hospital capacity, in number of people sick, in death rates. But if you let it play out, I guarantee what will happen is, like I'm saying, is people will adapt. They'll start to find solutions. You'll start to, again, whether it be doctors coming to your house or et cetera, life will go on and it'll change for the better. But so if you look at it this way, so if on Long Island, best case for phase 2 is June 15th and you use that 2-week thing, best case for phase 3 is July 1st. Best case for phase 4 is July 15th. So in a best case scenario, you have everything open by July 15th on Long Island, and that's still, you can guarantee it's still with all these social distancing, must wear a mask, restrictive measures in, because once they have all 4, they get to phase 4, there's still going to be, I'm sure, a 2-week evaluation period, and then maybe after that they lift all that stuff. So you're talking August 1st, maybe best case scenario for on Long Island, everything open, and maybe they lift some of this crazy stuff.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to open beaches.
And people are going to go nuts. I mean, again, you can't.
Beaches won't be open. Sporting events won't be held. What is phase 3?
Well, phase 3 is so phase 2 is professional services, which includes, and then more retailers and real estate firms are included in phase 2. Phase 3 is restaurant, bars, hotels, and phase 4 is, they say, cinemas, theaters, more entertainment and luxury type things.
Phase 3 is going to be a stick. It's going to.
But you'd have to imagine phase 4 includes sporting events. I mean, if it's 4 phases, at the end of phase 4, you'd imagine everything's there. Otherwise, it would be 5 phases, and they put sporting events in phase 5.
Yeah.
I mean that.
But who? I mean, who's going to like an Islander game or a Mets game or a Yankees game?
Well, that's I don't know. Again, so I used to think people will not return to normal. But the longer this goes on and the more restless I get personally and the more restless I see people getting, is people just want to live. They may just throw up their hands and say, listen, what am I going to do? I'm going to throw away my whole life or throw away 2 years of my life to be safe. And then maybe in year 3, this is all the way they have a cure. I get hit by a car. A tree falls on me. Well, then it was like, fuck. I mean,
man,
I wish I went to that Islander game. I mean, you're just you're not safe. So
it's true.
I'm starting to think people may go back to, listen, if you went out to restaurants because you like to go out to eat, you're probably going to go back. Like I never went out to restaurants a lot. I didn't go to a lot of sporting events. So I'm not going to do that stuff. And if you asked me to go, I probably wouldn't, but I probably wouldn't have gone anyway. But if you're a huge fan, you're probably going to do, like, you might start going back to the gym because you like to go to the gym.
I will definitely be going to the gym.
Exactly. So if you
I just don't know that I'm going to do it right out of the gate.
No, but at a certain point, you're going to get back to it.
Yeah, I'll probably get back to it. See, I'll probably let everyone else get back to it, and then let them get sick if it's going to be that, and if the coast is clear, that's when I'll go.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of people are going to take that approach, which means everything's going to be backlogged a bit. So just because real estate opens in phase 2 and we're back at it, does that mean that people are ready to list and sell and buy and go see and hold open houses? And what does an open house look like? Does an open house look like Costco when everyone's got to stand 6 feet apart out front and one person tours the house at a time? Is it a virtual
open house?
Is it a virtual open house? I mean, what, what, how does this all change, and what is the liability, right? So, I mean, I know they're talking about this in big corporations, but for instance, we come from the medical device world, right? Where sales reps would go into a hospital and sell things. Mm-hmm. Can you, as an employer now, as a manager or an employer, tell your sales rep you have a quota to hit, go, or you're fired, and you're sending them into harm's way?
Yes. Get a new job if you don't like it.
I hear you, and I'm not against you, but we all know that lawyers exist, right? And this is what's going to happen. That sales rep's going to go in there. They're going to do their thing. They're going to get sick. They're going to bring that home. If that person or anyone in their home has any lasting effect from being sick with coronavirus, let's say they lose 10% of their lung capacity, right? We've heard of people that get very sick and they have like scarring on their lungs or something like that. Let's say they have that. Now they have a loss. And they did that. They have that loss because they were pressured to go to work by their manager and do that thing. Now they can turn around and sue the company. And that is a liability. So do the companies that are sent that, do companies think of things like that now, and do they reverse course and change that job for that employee, because that is a liability?
Unfortunately, you're gonna see a situation, I think, yes, where you're gonna see lawsuits, and this is where you have to hope. You hope the government.
Are we liable if we tell a seller? No, this is a little crazy. Mm-hmm. Are we liable if we tell a seller you should do an open house at this house because we'll sell it with an open house? You do the open house, you have a bunch of people through, they come home, they get it, they believe it's because you told them to do an open house.
Well, this is where I'm not optimistic this will happen, but the judicial system needs to act responsibly and not create crazy legal precedents that are just going to handicap and destroy all ways of life and business. And I'm not optimistic that'll happen, but I mean, you just have to take responsibility. You can't just start suing everyone.
There's going to be a wave of that, though. You know how
yes,
America is.
unfortunately, you're right, and it's sad that that's a reality,
Yeah.
and that the judicial system, actually allows these crazy precedents to happen.
And that's also why a lot of people aren't going to return to their offices, and why I think we're going to see a lot of commercial real estate where employees had to report to the office, and businesses that were run in such a way that you had to be somewhere at a specific time. It's going to change.
I think from a commercial standpoint, I think the largest commercial buildings are the ones that are going to be screwed, because what will happen is there's huge companies. So take a Google or an Amazon. Everyone's going to downsize.
Yeah.
They're going to say, we don't need all this office space. We don't need all these people coming to work. We can do with 25% of it or 50, whatever it is. So you're going to have the huge companies downsize. Everyone's going to downsize a little. So I think from a commercial perspective, you're going to see lots of transactions happening because so much change. The overall market's going to hurt because the big stuff is the most expensive. So when you look at the numbers, the dollar volume of sales and stuff, I think you're going to see a huge hit. But I think the transactions are going to be there, and for anything that's small to mid-size, I think it'll be fine because there's always a bigger company where that space is small too. Right. But for the big stuff, like the huge buildings in Manhattan or big department stores, the Macy's, things like that, yes, that part of the commercial sector, I think, is going to be screwed.
Well, I think a lot of that commercial space might also be converted into residential space. And then what will happen is it will probably bring prices down because that will end up flooding the market with more inventory. And we already know that New York City had way too much inventory to begin with.
Or it could also just become warehouse and storage space. I mean, as the demand Amazon needs a place to store all these goods, and people may want it. Right now you can get it next day, but that might not be enough. People might want it same day, and Amazon probably want to provide that service for same day, just from a competitive and a business standpoint, because the need is there. So maybe your local Macy's shuts down, but Amazon buys it, and they buy one in every 50-mile radius, where they can now have a warehouse and a shipping center to get stuff out same day. So are certain commercial real estate properties going to suffer? Yes, but they'll also new uses for them will come to light, for sure.
Yeah. Well, we keep hearing about the de-urbanization. I mean, this is something we also spoke about last week, I believe, but it's actually becoming more and more of a prevalent conversation. We actually just had a phone call from one of our friends' fathers this morning who's looking to somehow capitalize on it. Is the move of people out of New York State to Florida specifically, and other tax exempt states, because from what he tells us is he's been working in the city for how long? 30 years,
probably
maybe
something like that.
Probably something like 30 years. He's been going back and forth to Manhattan. He works in the finance industry. He's got a lot of friends, knows a lot of people, and he tells us that every single one of them is looking to relocate. They're getting out of New York. They want to go to Florida. They want to go to the Carolinas. They just want to get out. And they want to get out because, number one, you're adding something like 12 to 14% back to your bottom line just by doing that, because you're not paying state income taxes and city taxes and all that stuff. And on top of that, it's just a better way of life, according to him. And people are starting to see that because they've gone down there and they've checked it out. Do you think that this becomes a mass exodus? What transpires in your opinion?
Yeah. From a de-urbanization standpoint, I think you're going to see people leave the city, leave the urban for the suburbs. That doesn't mean New York City to Florida. That means New York City to Long Island or Jersey or Connecticut.
Yeah.
It probably even means,
The Hamptons too.
In Tampa and Orlando and Miami, major cities, they start to move to some more suburban areas in Florida. You're going to see areas that are more dense. Those areas are going to depopulate to areas that are less dense. That's coronavirus related. That's deurbanization for coronavirus. Then the other side of the coin is just the political and financial aspect of it, is where you have a state like New York, where you have crazy high taxes. You have a governor who's keeping everything shut down, who's saying we might have virtual schooling for our kids, right? Then you're going to see people leave states like that for maybe a state like Florida, where you don't have the taxes, you don't have the governor forcing virtual schooling on you. So there's two pieces to it. And one is going to be a catalyst for the other. The coronavirus is going to be a catalyst for both the deurbanization, obviously, but also the moving out of state, because people are going to say, well, if I'm moving, let me consider where, and they'll take those other factors in. So yeah, I think we're definitely going to see a movement of people out of dense areas into other areas, and we're going to see a movement. It's gonna increase the movement of people out of certain states that have high taxes or
do you think
a lot of restrictions in place to other states.
You think we're going to see a lot of tax hikes in New York?
I think you're going to see tax hikes everywhere. We're borrowing. We just borrowed. What we borrowed last quarter? The United States.
The United States borrowed $3 trillion in the second quarter of 2020, and all of last year we printed 1.23 trillion.
And so that money's borrowed. That has to be paid back.
But the local municipalities. So here's the deal. Federally, someone's going to be on the hook for the money that we're printing. Locally, in New York, they're not collecting money and they're spending a shitload of money.
Mm-hmm.
So is it possible that our federal taxes
are going to go up? This all has to be paid for. What was it? After World War II, taxes, I don't know the exact number, but taxes were crazy high because we had all this debt from the war that we need to pay back.
So here's my question is, in New York, people feel like they're being taxed out as is before all this happened. So what happens moving forward?
Yes, you're going to see a lot of people leave. I don't see how you couldn't. But you're going to see that everywhere is my point. Well, in any urban area, I think you're going to see.
Or do we see the state just default on their debt? Is that something that could happen? I know it's illegal for the federal government to bail out a state, right?
I don't know. But they seem to be changing the laws are written in such a way where the government can interpret them to their favor. They're so ambiguous.
It's true.
I heard there used to be a law or laws. I don't know if there used to be a law, but laws used to have to be written so that people can understand them in layman's terms. Now laws are written so ambiguously
it's a book
that they could be interpreted in whatever way you want.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know what'll happen. I don't think you can listen, the federal from a like a voting perspective, an electoral college perspective, like Trump's not going to win New York. So maybe he says, screw it, we're just not going to bail them out because I'm not getting those votes anyway. So I don't care if I piss those people off.
Mnuchin sits there and says, it's funny, that he'll get interviewed and, some interviewer will be like, are you going to bail out the state of New York? Are you going to give them financial assistance? Mnuchin flat out just goes, they should probably be more fiscally responsible if they're in trouble.
But at the same token, New York gives like $160 billion to the federal government each year. So you're saying,
whereas other states a lot of red states take money from the federal government, which I didn't know. I thought that was very interesting.
So is New York? I don't know the answer. So is New York actually that fiscally irresponsible, or if you just even the playing field, would they be fine? And would the state like Kentucky that gets money from the government, are they actually the ones that are fiscally responsible that wouldn't be fine? I don't know the answer. I don't know.
Neither do I.
The inner workings.
I don't. I mean, clearly there's a lot of waste in government.
Yes. I would say no. Listen, we're at a point where the fallout is going to be huge.
Well, there's going to be a ripple effect. I was watching a podcast the other day. And somehow the guy has some kind of ties to Robert Kiyosaki, who could be a little bit overboard at times, but this guy was not overboard. He was perfectly reasonable. He was with it, and he was talking about the ripple effects of all this and what the timelines look like. with the next 30 to 60 days, and then the next 3 to 6 months, and the next 12 months to, 3 to 4 or 5 years out, and what the ripple effect's going to be, and with regards to real estate, and why it's going to be that, and everything ties back to unemployment, people not working, cash flow stopping, and the economic machine, if you will, kind of just bogging down and seizing, and there not being any transaction happening. And when that happens, it's all it takes is one part of the chain to fall apart, that the rest of the chain falls apart. It's like what we were talking about with the restaurant owner. The employees can't come to work, the restaurant owner can't make his money, can't pay his rent, the landlord, then the bank, and it just keeps going up and up and up. But it's going to be interesting to see how it all unfolds, and really, how do you position yourself to make money in this environment? And even more than that, like, what makes no fucking sense is the stock market.
No. Unemployment's at what, like 30 million? And the stock market's probably up today.
The stock market right now, let me see. It's level at 23,883.
And they just announced unemployment's at 30 million.
Makes no sense.
No, so the problem is the whole system has been manipulated and bailed out for so long that, like I said before, the fallout is going to be huge. It's at a point where you just can't manipulate it and bail out forever.
No.
So the fallout can be so huge. So it sounds hard. The correct answer was there should have been no manipulation or no bailout from the start. That's the correct answer. Now the answer is probably, listen, at some point you just have to bite the bullet and not bail anyone out and stop manipulating it. But it's just the fallout's so huge that it's almost impossible for anyone to actually make that decision and say, okay, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
So you just have to try and keep it propped up as long as you can. I don't know. Hope something works out.
Talk to me about Cuomo with this school thing.
Well, I think he announced, I forget the exact quote, but the exact quote was something like, we have to adapt to the new normal. We have the technology available today. Why are we going to send kids?
He's working with Bill and Melinda Gates.
Yeah, the Gates Foundation. Why are we going to send kids back to physical school? We should do it, which to me is just so. I mean, that he has got to realize how stupid that is. And people, first of all, a lot of parents don't have the ability to be at home while their kids are schooled virtually.
No.
They have to go to work. And they just can't be at home with their
so that
kids
would that would take taxpayers out of the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
So he's hurting himself.
Yes. Second of all, so you have that. Second of all, even for families with a stay-at-home parent or who can stay home for the virtual schooling, I mean, is it realistic? I mean, how much is that stresses and work is that on the parent to do all the stuff they normally do? But now they have 3 little kids in elementary school or whatever it is that they got to keep in front of a screen for 6 hours in a day and keep them focused and jump from kid to kid. That's not realistic. And then you just have the aspect of, I mean, I have young kids, you have young kids. I want my kids to go to school. I want my kids to interact with other kids. I don't want them to be at home all day.
When I think back on my life in school, I mean, elementary school through junior high school through high school, I mean, that time, and then college after that time really molded who I am today in every sense of being molded. I mean, it was school combined with my parents.
But school teaches you how to interact socially, how to be a person.
And how to get up in the morning and go somewhere and work, and then come home and do some work.
And be independent. You don't have your parents around all day. You have to.
And then the sporting aspect, and the camaraderie of teams and getting together with other athletes and competing against other schools.
So that's the other thing. What's the point if you're going to cancel school, but you're going to allow sports? I mean, it's the same thing. It's tons of kids hanging out. So now you're going to cancel sports. So now you're going to cancel sports too. I mean, you can't do that. Or clubs or activities. If you want to give people the option and say, listen, we're going to partner with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and we're going to make a huge investment so that you have the option to school virtually should you want. Fine. Give people the option to say, hey, we're going to force it upon everyone.
I don't think they
crazy.
can. I don't think see, part of me also thinks that this is because the state is broke and falling further and further into debt. That they believe that if they moved school, which is, if you haven't looked at your property tax bill, our biggest expense on that bill is school.
Yeah, school taxes.
Right? Mm-hmm. And they'll never go down our taxes. But if they could somehow make providing education to people cheaper by taking it to a virtual situation, then maybe at that point,
they raise the other taxes. So people are even in taxes. It's just that they've shifted where the tax dollars go.
Right. And they're pocketing more. They've made it more cost efficient to send kids to school. Maybe that's it. I have no idea. All I know is it's really, really a crazy thought. I mean, everything for me growing up, competing in football with the guys that I competed in football with since I'm 8 years old, all the way up through high school, and then wrestling and all those guys. Competitively and just who I became because of that is a result of that. What would I have developed if I had been homeschooled? It would have taken all those experiences away. And I'd probably be a very different person today. So I think and then there's, on top of that, there's a whole demographics of kids out there that are special needs kids that you
just can't do it virtually.
No, they
need in person.
There's kids out there that are autistic. There's a huge population of kids out there that are autistic that have problems, that need more attention, not less. So how does that work?
You can't take away school. Listen, technology is a good thing, but again, don't decide for people, hey, this is the way the future is going to be. Just let it be. If it turns out that schooling is going to be replaced by technology in some aspects, that'll happen naturally. Things will evolve and progress like that. I'm one of the people I'm one of the last people who will move out of New York just because I'm happy and I'm I guess for lack of a better phrase, like a fighter. I'll figure it out. I'll work. Everything will be fine. But if you cancel schooling, make virtual schooling mandated, that is something that'll drive me out. So I have to think, just knowing myself and how tough it would to really do something that would motivate me to leave the state. Yeah. Something like that. You would have a mass exodus of New York State.
See, for me, I'm a New Yorker. In a perfect world, everything goes back to normal, and one day I become a snowbird and I go back and forth to Florida. The one thing that is very appealing to me and that I think of often is if I can add that extra 12 to 14% back to my bottom line and invest it over the next 30 years and then compound that money, how much more money at the end of this life do I have to retire on and pass down to my kids? And you have to think that wealthy people, I'm talking really wealthy people who have teams behind their money of people who make strategic decisions. Give me a number,
50 million or more, 100 million or more, 20 million or more?
I don't know. Whatever level you get to where you have so much money that you can't just buy the S&P 500 index fund and you have to turn it over to a money manager and or a team of people and say, I don't know what to do with all this. You've got to allocate my money. And those people, they research and they're playing the whole country and they're saying, okay, there's tax benefits in Arizona if we own property to do XYZ with, if we buy some property here and it's farmland, we get this tax break, right? If we set you up in this tax exempt state as your home state, you have to stay there 181 days a year and you get this exemption, right? And that's what they do.
But let me ask you this. So the people with that much money that have that team, do they need to move their primary residence to achieve that? Or are there other ways that entire team can figure out, hey, listen, you can live your life wherever you want. We'll make sure you keep as much money as possible.
No, they don't do that. They because part of it is it's the incentive. There's a tax code. The tax code is nothing more than incentives to do things a certain way. And if you do them that way, the government tells you can keep your money.
But I'm sure that my point is, if you have $100 million in a team, they could probably say, listen, we have a few different options. They all get you 14% back more.
Let me put it this way. Because they're not even playing the national game at that point. They're playing the international game. They're putting money all over the world.
Exactly. So my point is they need to change their primary residence to achieve that goal.
I don't know.
And the other thing is, if you're worth $100 million and you say, listen, we can save you, 14%, you'd be worth $114 million. And then, at that, do you say, is it really worth uprooting my entire life and changing where I live?
I'm sure there's a report somewhere that tells you where the 1% live and where what the trends are of where they've been moving to lately. Does that make sense?
It makes sense what you're saying. I'm just for the sake of having a conversation in the back and forth, I'm just taking the side of it. But my point is, I don't think you need to move to achieve that. Like, you personally, you have money where you could just invest in something that'll get you an extra 14% return. You don't need to move to do that. You could buy 2 properties in Florida, rent them out, and make 14%, or flip a house and make 14%. You don't need to uproot your whole life and move to do that. So that's just my side of the coin. Is
I think if anything, it means more to the middle class and the lower.
For the people that are just getting by, those are the people.
If I told them I could give them another 14% of their money every year, 12 to 14% of their money every year, that's significant for them.
I agree with that. For the middle class, yes.
Yeah. I mean, there are some people who take home, let's say you're making, for argument's sake here, let's say you're making $100,000 a year, which on Long Island is middle class. A combined household income of $100,000, divide that by 52, is $1,923 a month. So if I told that person I could give them a week, if I told that person I could give them another $300 a week,
that person, yes, it makes a difference.
That's a big difference.
And you could decrease their cost of living.
So they leave.
But what happens? So when everyone leaves Florida, what happens? It's simple supply. It's like economics 101 is supply and demand, right? So when everyone goes to Florida, because that's where it's cheaper, guess what? Housing prices goes up, everything. So now you don't have the state income tax.
It's not cheap to live in Florida, in certain parts of Florida, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, southern Florida on the coastline is very expensive. But there's other parts that are more affordable. I don't know. We'll see.
It's going to be very interesting.
Who knows? The homeschooling thing's a little crazy too, though. What do you think, to wrap this thing up with regards to real estate?
Well, I wrote down some basic numbers here.
Go ahead.
Just to give an update on the market. So from May 1st to May 6th, forget about houses that have gone into contract and what's closed, because those are lagging indicators. Let's look at new listings, because I feel like that's just that gives a very good idea of what the present market's like. Yep. May 1st to May 6th, 2019, 825 new listings hit the market.
Yep.
May 1st to May 6th, 2020, 331 new listings hit the market. So you're seeing still, whatever.
It's a 70% write down in business.
Yeah, you're seeing a huge write down in business.
Yeah, last month was very similar. I think last month there was 3,600 new listings to market and about 1,200 in 2020 for the month of April, comparing 19 to 20, which was about a 66% write down. And this looks the same.
This is kind of indicative, though, of what we've been talking about, in that the whole economy I don't think things, like you said, are going to bounce back right to normal. It's people are still going to do things. They're still going to live. In this case, there's still going to be transaction in the market. It's just going to be tremendously less, and it'll slowly start to creep back up. But it's going to take a while for it to creep back up to where it was. And the same thing goes for the restaurant industry and the sporting events.
So you don't think that once phase 2 comes and they let realtors go back to work in New York, that listings are going to fly on the board? You still think we're going to see that same 66% write down?
Yeah, because so take last year, for example, of that 825, how many really, really wanted to or really, really needed to get their house on the market? You're going to have a lot of people, I think, who, we want to upsize, we want to downsize, we want to get closer to the grandkids, right, whatever it is, that put their house on the market. Now they're going to say, you know what? I still, just with this coronavirus out there, I don't want people in my house. I don't feel comfortable. You know, we need a little more space, yes, but this works fine for now. Or we want to downsize, but you know, whatever, we'll pay. You know, we'll wait another year to downsize, or we'll wait another year to get closer to the grandkids. So I still think you're going to see people be hesitant, and you're still going to see a lower number. It is definitely going to go up.
Right.
It's just not going to get to what it was. I'm hopeful that you'll see the buyer demand though on Long Island with the urbanization that we're talking about.
Yep.
For sure. It's
So what happens to brokerages?
Well,
how many brokerages are going to go out of business because of this?
It's the same thing as that, right? So it's funny when you look at one industry, it's the same across all. Same thing with restaurants. You're going to have restaurants go out of business. There's going to be brokerages. You already have brokerages closing offices.
Yeah.
There's going to be brokerages that go out of business. There's going to be agents that go out of business. I mean, the whole economy is affected. There's still going to be a market for it though, and there'll still be transactions. And the ones who can sustain will probably do even better. It's like the restaurants that can afford to stay open.
Yeah.
They'll probably do even better because now
they'll be the only game in town.
Now there's 50 or 25% of the restaurants available to go to.
Maybe this makes the big guys bigger and the small guys leave the market because the big guys the people who could weather this storm will be the only option when the storm is over. That's a possibility.
Well, I mean, again, the other hand, just to give it an alternate perspective, is the big guys could have huge overhead. They may not be the ones who can weather the storm. It may be the small guys with very little overhead that all of a sudden weather the storm and now grow tremendously when they're out of this. There's too many unknowns. There's too many variables. We'll have to see what's going to happen.
You're going to see a drop in licenses. A lot of real estate agents aren't going to maintain their license.
Yeah,
because they're not going to feel like maintaining their license with continuing education and the cost of it all is even going to be worth it because they're not going to transact at all.
Yeah. Well, that brings up a good point. The timing of this, most agents just renewed their LIBOR dues, their E&O insurance. They just paid those expenses. So they've done it for the year. But next year, yes, depending on how quickly things rebound, especially if there's not as many transactions, it's going to be the fact. Right now, you're not seeing a huge hit because people still are living off their what's in contract and closings. But 331 new listings, there's not going to be a lot of transactions this summer.
No.
There's not going to be a lot of money to go around.
No. So what do you do? How do you as a real estate agent make it in an environment like this?
So I think the number one answer is you have to keep working. You have to keep working. You can't just sit back. And for me, what that is you have to continually get leads and work those leads. If you have a system and process in place to obtain new leads and continually work the new leads and your old leads, I think you'll be fine. If you're not continually getting new leads and working all of your leads, you're going to have an issue. So I think that's the key, is getting the leads and continuing to work them.
I think the most concerning thing for us is really going to be, or the biggest factor in the success of real estate agents is probably going to be what happens with banks and how they are lending to people after this. If banks are lending to people fluidly and the criteria doesn't tighten up too much to get loans, I think we'll be just fine. If the bank, it really comes down to the banks. If the banks tighten up to a point where it's very difficult to borrow money, that's going to be a little bit of an issue because a lot of people's liquidity is not so liquid anymore. They're drying up, right? Because if the cash flow stops and people stop making money, even if they had a stockpile of money that starts to get chopped away at slowly, then they don't have their down payments. And if they raise the down payment to 20% down, which they did in the beginning, I don't know what the status is of that. Have you talked to any of our lenders?
I think it's certain banks have those requirements.
Yeah, because I know that we just sold a house last week with 5% down FHA. So
the FHA, you still don't need it. You could put down less. As we're having this conversation, I guess what I'm realizing in my head and the way to simplify it is, It comes down to simple supply and demand. Right now, the new listings are your supply. The supply is way down. The demand will be determined by things like the bank. If banks are going to tighten their lending restrictions, you just won't have as many buyers, and that's buyers are your demand, and you'll have less demand. So in terms of housing prices, we'll see how that plays out. But you'd have to imagine you're already seeing the supply is lower, and you'd have to imagine there's going to be, even if it's just a little squeeze, some type of squeeze on lending restrictions in banks that causes a lower demand too. So you're going to see less transactions. Last year on Long Island, we had just shy of 20,000 transactions. 20,000 transactions supported the industry as it is today. Based on the simple fact of the lower supply
there
over the
should
past
be like
couple
8
months.
or 9.
Yeah, you're going to have less transactions. So less transactions mean it's going to support a smaller industry.
Yeah, it's going to be if there's a 66% write down in listings, there should be a 66% write down in transactions, right? I mean,
yes, over those months. So now over the course of a year, obviously that's not, but yeah, over these months you should see 66% less, right? That or something around that shouldn't be too far off.
Yep.
In which case you're going to see a lot of agents and brokerages and offices close because there's just not the same level of business to support them.
That's pretty freaking crazy.
Which is why everyone needs to keep working, because if you don't keep working, you won't be one of the ones that survive. You'll be one of the ones that does less transactions.
I think there's also going to be an older demographic that's just going to leave the industry.
Yeah, people that have the money to retire.
They will. They don't want to risk getting sick, and they're also not going to be able to adapt to this virtual world we live in. But that's the weird thing about real estate, right? Real estate is so tangible.
At some point, you still need to see the house.
You have to still see the house, right? So, I mean,
a lot more is going to be done virtually. It'll be initial steps, but there's still going to be a final step where you do your inspection and you see the house. But maybe now, instead of doing, instead of going to see a house once, twice, 3 times, then get a done deal and do an inspection, maybe it's you look at the pictures, you get a Matterport tour, you get a virtual FaceTime walkthrough, then you're like, all right, this is pretty much the house for me.
Yeah.
Let me just see it to check that box and then schedule the inspection. Yes, but at some point you'll still have to see it. But not for everyone also. There probably will be people who are comfortable buying sight unseen. I mean, sight unseen happens now. It happened before coronavirus.
That's if the number is so far below the comps in the area.
Or if it's a new construction.
The problem is too, though, like the comps, like how do you comp a house? Like if you said to me right now, Ron, go comp a house out. I'm not so sure I would know exactly how to do it, because the comps of the last 6 months are not going to be the comps moving forward. And I wonder how appraisers are appraising houses. Well, like, for instance, we do, like Walnut. Walnut is in Islip. We set a record for the sale in that neighborhood. They did a drive-by appraisal. They appraised it at the number that we sold it at. And it's the most expensive house in that neighborhood. 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, whatever it is, it appraised.
Well, the comps and the appraisals are based on recent sales. So instead of going back a year or 6 months even, maybe only go back 2 or 3 months now. And that's what that stuff is based off of. Recent sales. Now, if someone asks you, what's the value going to be, am I paying at the height of a market or something like that? That's when, you never knew the answer to that. Yeah. That's when that changes.
But these banks also know that the forward-looking prices of these homes are not going to be.
Well, I think you will see a little dip, because confidence, if there's less confidence, that'll be reflected in purchase prices. But that's where the market will determine that. If buyers are still paying what the comps were a year ago and what houses were appraising for a year ago, that just shows they still have confidence in the market. And if they still have confidence in the market, I mean, who are we to say?
The question will be, is the bank going to lend based on that? Or are they going to lend on a new standard?
A bank appraisal is done based off recent sales. So is a bank all of a sudden going to say, hey, I see the recent sales are there, but we don't care, we're not confident in the market? Do banks do that? I don't know.
Yes, because they're lagging indicators. Closings are lagging indicators. Banks know that a closing today is a sale that happened 3-4 months ago.
Yeah, but their appraisal is based off of a recent sale, not what they think the future is going to bring. We'll have to ask an appraiser.
Yeah, we do. That'll be interesting. Well, I got nothing else. You got anything else?
No, I have nothing else.
All right, guys. We are the Pesce Lanzillotta team at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. If you want to get in touch with us to buy, sell, transact any real estate, our number is 516-888-9711. That's 516-888-9711. Our office email is info@pl-team.com. That's info@pl-team.com. And thanks for listening to us today. We really appreciate your time. Mike, anything?
Stay safe, stay healthy.
And let's get back at it. All right.
Yes.
Take care. Bye.